We talked about initial access, so how attackers go about gaining access to our machines. We talked about privilege escalation and lateral movement. So once attackers gained initial access, how do they go about escalating their privileges and fully compromising the machine? The last thing that's left for us to talk about is once attackers have gained maximum access, what are their goals? So I'm going to have, as an attacker, I'm going to have two goals going into this. Goal number one is going to be to make sure I keep access to the target. That means even if the target reboots, even if the target restarts a service, I still, as an attacker, keep access to their machine. This is known as persistence. The second goal that I'm going to have as an attacker is to keep my target's firewall down as much as possible. The reason for that is the firewall is the defender's first line of defense against me to reduce their external attack surface, right? So my target may have a ton of ports open, but only one of them actually needs to be open. And if they're lazy, they can just put up a firewall, not actually close the ports that are supposed to be open. Instead, they could just set up a firewall that blocks me from exploiting all those other services. Or they could set up a firewall that blocks outgoing connections from their machines so my command and control doesn't work, right? So one of my biggest goals as an attacker is going to be to disable firewalls. So in this video, I'll be focusing on two things. I'll be focusing on how can I keep access to the machine and survive all sorts of different events, whether that be reboots, whether that be service restarts. The second goal that I'm going to have is to keep firewalls down on the target as much as possible. That's how I'm going to be approaching this part of the video series where we're focusing on persistence. So, going back to the GitHub repository that I've been referencing in other videos as well, if we scroll down and we check out the attack vectors under Linux Defense, we've already looked at this before, but scrolling all the way down, you see a whole section on persistence. And this includes all of the persistence techniques that I will cover in this video. There's way more than just this that you can do with persistence. This is certainly not an exhaustive list. Just like with privilege escalation, it's really difficult to find every way that an attacker has established persistence. And there are so many ways that they can do it, and they can get really creative. So this is only going to be an introduction to persistence. If you want to see a more complete list, I highly recommend checking out this Linux persistence checklist on payloads, all the things. So if I go ahead and open it up, you can see that it talks about all sorts of different ways that attackers can maintain access. And this includes some of the ones that we'll be talking about and a lot of ones that I won't get the chance to cover. Even payloads, all the things, unlike the hack tricks checklist for privilege escalation, I think that one really did a great job covering almost all the different ways you can escalate privileges. This checklist is, in my opinion, a little small. There are plenty more ways that even this checklist does not cover. So it's certainly worth going out there, doing your research, seeing what sorts of creative ways attackers can come up with for maintaining persistence. Okay, with these two goals in mind, with keeping firewalls disabled and maintaining access, there are two things that I'm going to be doing a lot of. One is running a command that disables firewalls. And that command I will introduce to you first right now. So if I go to my attacking machine, the command that I'm using to disable firewalls, in this case, in this demo, is going to look something like this. All these firewalling solutions that we talked about in previous videos, including UFW or uncomplicated firewall, Firewall D, all of these firewalling solutions really just use IP tables under the hood. So if, as an attacker, I want to disable your firewall, I can just use IP tables and disable all the IP tables firewall rules. Now, this might not always be the case. Let's say you're using something that doesn't rely on IP tables, like newer versions of NF tables that are kind of their own thing. Then I'd have to add more to this, but for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to disable all of the IP tables firewall rules. And that's going to cover IP tables, that's going to cover UFW, that's going to cover firewall CMD. So it doesn't matter what firewall solution you're using. No matter what, this command is going to disable your firewall, unless you're using some unique one like NF tables. But this first command here, IP tables-f, it flushes all of the custom rules. So it basically gets rid of any custom rules that you created. Along with custom rules that you create, there's also the default policy. So a lot of the times the default policy of the firewall is to block outgoing connections, and then you'll create rules on top of that to allow certain outgoing connections. So then to change the default policy, I change the default input policy to accept all connections. And then I'm going to change the default output policy to also accept all connections, right? And the other thing is I'm going to redirect any errors to dev null, so no errors show up and no errors get logged anywhere when I'm using these commands. And I'm stringing the three of them together with semicolons. So that just means run this command, then run this command, and then run this third command. So in all the examples that I'm going to show you in this video where I'm disabling firewalls, I'm going to be using this full command right here to do that. Okay, that's the first thing. When we're talking about maintaining access, right? Like I said in the first video of the attack and defense portion of the NC Cyber Sandbox tutorials, attackers use command and control frameworks. We talked about why, we talked about how that allows them to remain stealthy to somebody who's monitoring the traffic in a tool like Wireshark, right? So, for the sake of this demo, I'm also going to be using a command and control framework. The one that I chose to use is Sliver. I'm not going to go into how to use Sliver. I'm not going to go into detail because command and control framework is really up to you, and each one functions a little bit differently. But all of them have one thing in common, and that's that there's this malicious file or payload that you upload to your victim and run on your victim. And that's true of Sliver as well. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to generate that payload that I can run on the victim machine, and that's going to cause it to connect back to me and kick off that command and control process. Really quickly, how do I get that set up? Well, if I go to this Sliver documentation, sliver.sh/docs, you can check out the Getting Started page there. And this contains all the instructions that you need to know for using Sliver for the first time, including getting it set up. So I actually grabbed this command here to install Sliver, and I copied that and pasted it directly and installed Sliver that way. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say sudo system control start Sliver. This is going to start the Sliver server because Sliver works in the way that it has one server and then multiple red team operators can connect to that one server. Point is, I need to start this server and then I need to connect to it. So now that I started the server, I'm going to connect to my server with the Sliver command. First thing you need to do in command and control is create a listener. So that just opens my Kali machine up for incoming connections from the target. So in order to do that, I'll use the mtls command. Do I remember how to use it? Not entirely, so I'm going to consult the help screen. Looks like I can just specify the L port here, and I'll listen on port 443, let's just say, so that it blends in kind of nicely, or I guess it uses the same port as HTTPS traffic normally would use, and so that it is likely to be not firewalled, right? So now that we did that, now I'm going to generate my actual payload, which is that malicious file that I'm going to send to the target. I'm going to say generate beacon. And I don't remember these options off the top of my head, so I'm going to go through this. Don't mind me. Beacon. The architecture is AMD 64. We have format is exe. Then we want the jitter and the seconds. So jitter 0. Let's make the seconds something like 5. In the real world, you'd make that higher. But just for the sake of demonstration purposes, we'll leave that pretty low. And then -m. Now we have to specify, so whenever we're actually generating our payload, we have to tell it which machine it's going to connect back to, which in this case is our attacking machine. So this payload that we generate, this malicious file that kicks off this whole process, is going to be sent to the victim, and the victim needs to know how to connect back to us. So it needs to know our IP address and the port to connect back on. So my IP is 10.0.0.12. That port matches the one with the listener that I started, which is on port 443. I already set that. Oh, obviously I have to change the operating system to Linux because it's Windows by default. And then it looks like that's it. I could be missing something. We're about to find out. Nope, apparently I'm not missing anything. So now we just have to wait a little bit for it to actually generate that payload for us. And once that payload is created for us, we'll have it. And when we actually connect to our victim, we can always move it over to our victim machine and make use of it. So I'm going to skip ahead in this video to where it's finished compiling. So we're back. It took a little bit of time, but it finished compiling and it saved my payload or implant into home, Cali, and musical bail. It just kind of chooses some random name for you. And I'm going to go ahead and leave Sliver open, but at the same time, I'm going to open up a new terminal tab. So I also have my access to my Cali machine here. If I list what's here in my home directory, I have musical bail. I can actually rename it if I don't like the name musical bail. Maybe I can't rename it. There we go, musical bail, and I'm going to rename it to payload just so it's really clear what it is. And if I list files, now you see payload is there. From here on, I'm going to go through each of these examples pretty quickly. So I'm not going to be explaining step by step what I'm doing. I'm just going to explain the overall concept, and then I'm going to do it. That's because you don't necessarily need to understand the nitty-gritty details of the attacking side of things. I have experience doing the attacking side of things, and so I'll show you what that looks like. But if you don't understand it, that's okay. The important thing is the defending side of things. So when I switch perspectives and start talking about how to fix the persistence method, right? That's where you should tune in and really try your best to understand what I'm doing. All right? So again, if I'm going a little bit fast on the attacking side, my apologies. That's just because I want to get through this video as fast as possible, and the attacking side of things is not as important for you in this case.